was some issues around utilization of DBE contractors that drew quite a bit of attention. Some of our local contractors expressed their dissatisfaction through addressing WashDOT, FHWA, and others. And through an investigation, some things came up that were very clear that, in my opinion, as an independent observer, that there wasn't active management of the DBE program, and that the contractor wasn't fulfilling their obligation as it relates to DBE participation in managing a DBE program. So with that, I joined the state as an independent contractor. One of my first duties was, again, to kind of go back in and try to figure out, well, what was happening, what was going on. A lot of it was miscommunication, some of it was culture, some of it was systems. And so with that, the state entered into a conciliation agreement with STP. That conciliation agreement listed several items that the state and STP would engage in to rectify the situation and to move forward in a more collaborative way to ensure that our local DBE community was being utilized appropriately and fully, in my opinion. So with that conciliation came what a lot of people talk about at the state is this change order. And the change order was basically the basic contract for ensuring that the conciliation agreement was met. Inside of that change order, there were 4 or 5 basic items, some that were crosswalked from the conciliation, some crosswalked very specifically, some a little vague. And so one of the things that we found, or I found once I got there, is that we had to tighten that up and make sure that everything from the conciliation agreement walked its way over to some kind of contractual agreement to ensure that we were going to hit all of those markers. So I wanted to kind of give you an update on some of the main pieces that were in the change order, because that was the contractual piece that everyone had to adhere to and we had to work our way through. And one of the first items was really substantive because it asked for Seattle Tunnel Partners to go back and to meet with those complainants that Ali talked about to see if they could have commercially reasonable discussions to resolve some of the issues. So it was really like saying, okay, some things didn't go quite right here in the beginning, so let's make some space and go back. And let's have a conversation to better understand what the issues were. And in that conversation, let's work to see if there's some commercial function, basically a business deal, that we could work that could satisfy what we didn't do so well in the beginning. Out of those 8 complainants, they had their meetings, which was contractual. They had to have them by a certain date. And those, they had them. But really, I think post those conversations is where we really started to do the work. So STP, to their support, they basically sent their Dragado's vice president from New York here to Seattle. And he's here for the entire summer. He's here, I can't remember when he got here, but he's here through the end of August. A person with some authority, his name is Chris Ward. He was actually the executive of the Port of New York and New Jersey. So he's very talented, understands these issues, and we've been able to meet again with these 8 complainants to work through their issues. I don't want to talk too specifically about them, just more in general terms, but what I can say, out of those 8, I believe that 5 are in contractual negotiations where we're going to see a contract signed and they're going to be working. Some of them were very small issues, where we're going to have, again, well, I better not talk too specifically, but what I want to say is they've been extremely productive. Out of those 8, 5 are going to be contracted. We've reached some level of negotiation with them. 2 are still in discussion, and we're very hopeful that those will work through, and 1 is still in progress. So with that, I'd like to really report that I think that a good job has been done on those 8 in addressing their complaints, and most importantly, getting them to work. Because the lane that I'm running in is really about getting our contracting community to work. And then there are other issues out there. There are Title VI's that Ollie talked about. That's not my lane. That's someone else's lane. But in terms of working with STP, WashDOT, as an independent contractor and observer, my mission is to get folks back to work and to resolve some of the systemic issues, some of the cultural issues, communication issues, to make sure that everyone is taking an active role in managing a project. When you talk about DBE and DBE participation, where the feds really come at you is if you're not actively managing your project. If you actively manage it and you have an availability, you should be able to meet your goal. And that's what we're striving for. So again, this is the actual change order. I think it lists about 4 items. The first one, again, was having these discussions, making sure that they were productive and not pro forma, and that people were actually getting work and were moving quite positively in that area. The other thing was for us to have better communications and coordination between STP and the state. One of the things that we're doing now is we formed a oversight committee, which involves leadership from STP, leadership from the state. Alexis is on that committee, I'm on that committee. STP has hired an independent person to help from their side, which is Jan Kaiser. She's on that committee. The DBE diversity manager, his name is William Miller, who works out of New York, comes to Seattle once a month to sit in personally in the meeting. And so one of the things that we formed through that is what we call we've been working on RFP proposals. One of the issues was barriers around RFPs, people not having enough time to actually bid. And so this oversight committee works together. STP comes to that bi-weekly meeting with a whole list of their projects. We sit and discuss when those projects are going to go out, what the nature of the work looks like. STP then is charged to write a brief summary of that work. We then take that work prior to the RFP going out, and then we shoot it to Ollie, to NAMAC, to our other partner agencies, and then we get that description out in a way that allows more time. Even though the RFP hasn't actually gone out, our goal is to always add a couple of weeks in there so our contracting community can call the people who are listed, the PMs on the project, and actually get more information. And that's worked really well in the sense that we have seen more phone and email activity. So it's interactive now. We've got people calling, even if those folks are not specifically matched to that project perfectly. I think the good thing from it is STP is receiving calls, answering calls, engaging the contract community in an active way now. And so they're kind of using those new muscles that say, whenever we put something out, we should expect that we're going to get calls from more than who they may have identified as potential bidders to the project. So that's one of the other things that we've been working on. They've committed to the $96 million, and one of the other things that was very firm in the conciliation agreement, not so clear in the contract agreement, it was firm that they had to meet the $96 million, but then in the conciliation agreement it said how. It says that you're going to have to develop monthly reporting, you have to develop a means and methods for verifying all of the participation. So staff, Brenda Nambi, her staff, and others, myself, have worked together to put a template, a specific template together that will have all the information that FHWA is requiring, and that'll speak to the $96 million. It'll talk about the DBEs who are used. It shows our methodology for verifying that. That template has been completed. The first iteration that's going to go out to FHWA is just kind of being signed off by some legal folks with a cover letter, and then post that, we'll be establishing a baseline from that particular report, and then we'll be reporting monthly from that report. And those reports, those monthly reports have actually already been put together, but we had to establish a baseline before we could actually go with the first one, and then we'll adjust as we go. One of the questions people asked about, I know early on, they had this $96 million, they were probably less than 1% in terms of participation. Through verification of utilization, that $90 million, I think we're at least $30 million of that right now has been verified and accounted for. There's another $20 million sitting out there that we're still looking to verify. And it's a long process, you know. Each month they present us with a book of all the people that they've used, the canceled checks, and we go through and match them and crosswalk them to make sure they're verified, and that report comes to me, and I verify that, then that goes to OEO, and then it goes off to the feds. So we have a process in place to make sure that, that what they're counting is actual, because that's a very important piece. One of the other things we're working is to kind of get them closer to real time, to kind of speed up, because if they've got 20 million sitting out there unverified, then we got to make sure that we can get it in as quickly as possible, but it's got to be as accurate as we can make it. So that's one of the things on the 96 million. Then fourth and finally, STP was asked to hire a DBE coordinator, someone who works similar to my capacity, but they work with Seattle Tunnel Partners. Their goal is to ensure that they're managing their program actively, to advise and to guide them, to work with me to resolve any complaints that come forth through the process as we move forward. That person is Jan Kaiser. Her responsibility is to provide me a monthly report on how they're doing. She provided her first report last week, and so we're going through that report to make sure that it kind of meets the terms, conditions, and the needs that we need or that WashDOT needs, excuse me, in terms of moving that forward to satisfy the feds in terms of us actively managing that project. So that's the change order. And then inside the conciliation agreement, I mentioned that again, there are quite a few more things. They talk about making sure that the state has put enough resources together. Because it really is a heavy lift when you're trying to do this work. It's very data intensive and putting the resources together. So I believe we have the resources together. We've got a great collaborative team. Again, Alexis is there, I'm there, Jan Kaiser's there. We've got the president of Dragado's there, their DBE diversity manager, William Miller is there. And then we have, of course, the other folks, Chris Ward, Russell Stredbeck, all of these folks. And then in addition, I forgot the construction people, because that's another link that we've got to link in. They perform a really valuable job at doing what we call on-sites, to make sure that who's doing the work is actually doing the work and they're performing the work, and those on-site inspections that they may trigger other kinds of commercially useful function reviews. So there's a lot of eyes, a lot of resources, a lot of energy, and we're slowly working towards some systems that we can use to make sure that we can quantify our information. And so then we set that aside, and then we'll be making a bigger pivot to doing what I call some more active outreach, above and beyond advertisements or RFPs, but many of the things that the city has been very good at, the meet and greets, the forecasting of future projects, being able to share that with you, the DBE community, and making sure that all the right project managers and the folks who are responsible for making decisions are there for you to meet and to talk with. And then finally, putting together both a long-term and a short-term DBE support services strategy. One of the things that we've observed through this process, especially when you're entering an environment where you have a large, complex project, the delivery mechanism is design build. And for those who are not familiar with it, they're literally designing something, and then they're throwing it out there and saying, who can fix this? And that doesn't always facilitate for good small contractor participation, because it's kind of done on the fly a little bit. It's different than our standard design, bid, build projects where you design it, you bid it, people come in, you do it. This is, you design it, and then you build it. And in between, you got to squeeze in who's going to actually build it. So that it doesn't make for the best environment, and I really believe that's one of the things that created a challenge for the builder who was trying to design things as they go, and then trying to get it out to the street and build it as quickly as they could for some type of profit margin in there. So, but we I think we've established a change, a culture change, Alexis. We're not huge, but
we're definitely working in a more positive manner.
We're working in a more positive, a more collaborative manner, and each day brings a new challenge, and there's some miscommunications, but the right folks are in the room, and we're definitely working collaboratively to try to move forward on this project and reach that 96 million goal. So, if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.